Well, thanks everyone for joining today's discussion, Feed the Future. I'm Michael Sheldrick of Global Citizen, and I'll be hosting this important dialogue. In short, good food begins with farmers. They produce the food that ends up on our tables. Unfortunately, they also bear the brunt of climate change. From the recent Hurricane Laura that has devastated Louisiana crops, particularly rice crops, to the severe droughts that threaten farmers' livelihoods in sub-Saharan Africa. Climate change multiplies the threats facing farmers, many of whom are women and often food insecure themselves, living in poverty. COVID-19 has only added to this stress, cutting farmers off in rural areas from markets that sell produce or to buy seeds or fertilizer. And yet, farmers are the backbone of any civilization. They are the men and women who work tirelessly to feed society healthy, nutritious food, and are guardians of natural resources, and will be significant both to the reduction of greenhouse emissions and turning the tide on rising hunger. Where would we be without farmers, and particularly medium-sized farms and smallhold farmers? Where would we be without them? Don't they deserve our attention? Don't they deserve better? Well, to unpack this today, I'm joined by an incredible panel, each with tremendous stories and a rich background in their own impact. President Gilbert Houngbo, President of IFAD and the former Prime Minister of Togo, great to have you with us. Aksel Jakobsen, the Secretary of State for International Development of Norway. Sabrina Elba, actress, model, and IFAD Goodwill Ambassador. And Monika Froeler, the CEO of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. Together, we'll help bring prominence to the ways in which climate and environmental change impact world hunger and rural communities, and how together we can make food systems more sustainable and resilient. So, Sabrina, I'm going to come to you first. You've raised your voice this year in order to bring attention to the need to invest in sustainable agriculture. Throughout the year, you've helped shine a light on the hunger and climate crisis, not just in Africa, but worldwide. And you've also been named a UN IFAD Goodwill Ambassador for Women and Girls. Can you kick us off by telling us what inspired you to join IFAD, and why did you choose to champion this of all issues?
Thank you, Mick. Look, first, it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. I'd like to thank you and Global Citizen and the Bloomberg Green Festival for having me. And thank you again to His Excellency Gilbert and IFAD for allowing me this platform and honoring me with the role of ambassador. But many of you may not know, although I'm Canadian, my mother is actually from a rural community in Somalia. So when I say I'm passionate about these issues, it's because they're real and they're personal to me. You know, in my mother's eyes, and she would always say that global warming, it's not simply an academic concept. You know, unfortunately, it's a lived experience for many of the communities like the one that she grew up in. And she knows all too well what it means for a community financially when they cannot get access to water, or when floods devastate their lands and malnutrition rises because they lose their healthy food supply. She knows all too well that women who live off the land in Africa and Asia are suffering from hunger as we speak. But on top of that, they'd have to make life-altering decisions like pulling their kids from school when they can't afford fees because their crops fail due to drought. I don't think I need to remind everyone here that these issues all relate directly to climate change. I know all of us have been impacted by COVID-19, and we've all had our own crosses to bear. But what strikes me when I talk to my family back home in Africa is that the majority of people aren't worried about coronavirus. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about, survival and access to water. They're more worried about suffering hunger. And even before this horrible virus hit, there were already locusts ravaging crops in East Africa, climate shocks threatening food supplies, all while Africa is emerging from the worst drought in years. And this is happening as we speak. It's not theoretical. It's not some faraway truth. It is now. And it has made a future for rural people that is much more precarious, and action that is much more urgent. Thanks, Mick.
So thanks, Sabrina, and that's a good segue, because Gilbert, you as the head of the International Fund for Agricultural Development, you're at the heart of this crisis. And already before the pandemic, as Sabrina said, we were facing an acute hunger climate crisis at an unprecedented level. And we know that currently millions of smallholder farmers are struggling now to produce and market food due to the travel bans, rising inequality, and the stress on our ecosystems. Gilbert, what's IFAD's response to this food crisis? And what keeps you personally up awake at night?
Thank you so much. First of all, let me also welcome Secretary of State Aksel Jakobsen, and as well as Sabrina and Monika to this dialogue. And thank you for really moderating this this session. Quickly said, I will take it from where Sabrina left it. In fact, in as much as the coronavirus is hitting hard in terms of its impacts on the daily life of people, what keeps me awake in the night is it goes beyond coronavirus. Is really, IFAD 100% of what we do are focusing on the rural area. And what keeps me, quite frankly, awakened is the fact that when you look at the rural communities, they are always behind. It doesn't matter which parameter you look at. If you look at the general poverty, they are 3 times poorer. 80% of the poor are in the rural area. 1 out of 5 cannot have access to drinkable water. And you go on, the condition of the women are worse in terms of the right are worse in the rural community, be it on the measurable scale or not too measurable variables is really key. So that for me is really what's the crux of the matter. So what IFAD has been doing, the pandemic just made it even much more acute as an issue. So we have been responding on 2 fronts. The immediate response to the COVID, but keep in mind that even before COVID, the challenge was already quite very high. So you need to keep the 2 moving. On the COVID side, we have been repurposing all our projects based on the demand we receive, and so far I counted close to 75 countries that have requested IFAD to repurpose our ongoing project, so the resources can be used to really help the small-scale producers to face the consequence of the COVID. In doing so, we have to keep in mind what we have been doing and our normal activity already focusing on the 4 main thematic areas, obviously, which are the gender, which are the climate change, particularly the adaptation side, which is at the youth, as well as the nutrition dimension. So for us, it's all our help right now directed in helping those communities, particularly in getting access to seed and all the need for the planting season, as well as helping those that are challenged by accessing to the local or the regional market to facilitate that. But what also this COVID crisis has demonstrated is that it's not just that food security, it goes beyond the food security itself. For example, we have some small-scale producers, rural communities, that because they cannot sell their produce, they cannot pay back the local microfinance institution. So our help is to help them being able to make those payments for a few months until things are back to normal, or helping the government in fine-tuning their response to make sure that they do not forget those rural communities in the global, national, and national responses. So you do that, but it's also important, and I will stop after that point, that that response is also coordinated not only with the government, but also with all the development actors, not only the humanitarian colleagues, but also the development actors that are operating in the ground to maximize the effectiveness of our interventions. Over to you.
Thanks, Gilbert. Well, Monika, you're joined with us today, and you represent the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon. After consolidating the Paris Agreement, He's been around the world looking at what works when it comes to nurturing resilience in communities to ensure they can withstand climate shocks. Why is this a passion area and why is it so important?
That's a great question, Mick. We need resilience and we need adaptation to the climate realities that we are all facing. And indeed, we do need climate-smart agriculture. And Ban Ki-moon is passionate about it as former Secretary General because he has traveled all over the globe. He has seen what climate change is doing to the Antarctic, to the Arctic. He has seen the sprawling of the deserts in Mongolia and in the Sahel zone. He has seen that forests are burned down and that basically we are losing 36 football field sizes of forest every day. And of course, he has seen the droughts and he has seen the floods all over the planet. Now, he has always talked to the people at the forefront of these crazy developments that we have. And they are threatened, and they are threatened because their way of life has to change. And we don't even need to go so far. I mean, look at the US right now. We have the wildfires in California. We are really experiencing that Miami and Houston are building flood defenses. We are seeing New York, Staten Island building seawalls, investing into seawalls. And just this week, the New York Times has released a big issue on actually the scarcity of food that is triggered by all of these developments. The moment our climate changes, our modus operandi changes. Our agriculture has to change, and we need to care for food security. We are talking about a doubling of the threat in food security, and really billions of, like 250 million people will be threatened by food insecurity in the years to come. This is why he is passionate about it. This is why the Ban Ki-moon Center, why the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, why GCA and other partners are passionate about it. We need climate-smart agriculture.
So on that topic, when I think of countries stepping up and leading the way on just what you were saying, building a resilient, sustainable food system, Norway immediately comes to mind. Aksel, you've been engaged in this issue for quite a while. What do you see of the role that governments can and should be playing on this issue as it relates to the impacts of climate change, rising hunger, and the state of the world's food systems?
Thanks, Michael. I think that before we can play any role, we have to realize the strong connection between climate change, hunger, and food security. Climate change changes the world already and is destroying the harvest of millions of small-scale farmers. So what we need to do as governments, we need to understand the facts on the ground. And secondly, we need to promote the right solutions and policies, and we have to take these solutions to scale. And lastly, we need to build partnerships. Let me be a little bit more specific on this. Firstly, we need to fully take in that the changing climate has something in common with the coronavirus. It is undermining all our efforts to reach the SDGs. It is pushing millions of people into poverty, and it is the driver behind today's growing hunger crisis. From Tonga to Timbuktu, harvests are being destroyed by floods or droughts or wildfires. And more than 820 million people goes to bed hungry tonight. And most devastating, globally, every fifth child under the age of 5 is stunted. And this is not just statistics, it's an emergency that demands action. And secondly, we need to strengthen the entire food systems, not just bits and pieces. This includes climate resilient production and bringing food to the market. And we must reduce food waste and make sure that the food we put on the table is healthy and nutritious. This is a core role for every government to ensure food security in a changing climate. And as you touched on, Norway has developed an action plan for sustainable food system in our development policy, the first of its kind, I believe, which take this holistic approach. And then again, good policies need to result in action on the ground. And Norway, on our side, have increased our budgets for food security and climate adaptation in developing countries. And we are now entering into partnerships with countries and organizations in order to take it to scale on the ground. If I have time, let me give you an example. Let me mention a new partnership that we have developed in Malawi. Over the years, we have supported individual partners, but as a direct follow-up of our action plan on sustainable food systems, we want the various partners to collaborate and complement each other. And as a result, the project Transform is now being launched in Malawi, with 13 partners included in one project, with aims to support 180,000 small-scale farmers. So that's making an impact on the ground. And lastly, I would mention to support food system and create resilience to climate change, it's more important than ever to ensure collaboration between governments, but also together with civil society, private sector, the research community, and the most important international organizations like IFAD and the Global Center for Adaptation. Thank you, Michael.
So, thanks, Aksel. So this has been declared an emergency, and all of you have spoken about the challenges that exist. President Houngbo, I want to come back to you, because we know that we need to reach more than 100 million farmers in the poorest countries. And we need countries and leaders to come together, just like what Aksel in Norway is doing. But all up, we're probably going to need $1.75 billion as part of your upcoming fundraising drive to help double your impact if we're going to turn the tide. So President Houngbo, from your perspective, what will it take and what needs to be invested?
Well, clearly, our ambition is to be able to mobilize part of our replenishment, 1.75 billion. And what we are doing, particularly for the climate change, we are offering a special window that will ensure that all money in that window will be dedicated to mostly adaptation for rural communities, but as well as building their resilience and mitigation as well. Our objective is to ensure that our global objective is by the time we turn to 2030, we can double our impact on the ground. As I'm speaking to you, as a minimum, every year we have about 20 million people that we help increasing their income by 20%. Beyond those 20 million, in 2019, we have reached out 115 million people with our program. So our ambition is by 2030, we can double that. And the 1.75 million will help us to start increasing toward that goal. So it's going to be, of course, very critical for us. And I want to express our thanks to Norway, to Secretary of State, and through you, the government here, because as you know, Norway is one of our pillars in the donor community that are really pushing for the agenda of the rural community, the agriculture, and particularly as relates to the gender, i.e. the women and the youth. My last, the last point that I wanted to also make there is that we have also to make sure that every single dollar invested yields the maximum outcome possible. So it's important for us to also make sure that we look also how the private sector can help in this adventure, in this objective. So what I mean here is that you can very much imagine a project from an adaptation perspective run by an SME and by a youth, and preferably a young women. So you can achieve so many objectives with the same approach. So that global approach is really what we are doing, and with a lot of support from our member states. Over to you.
Thanks, President Houngbo. Monika, I want to come back to you very briefly. On the subject of solutions, we just heard we need clearly a lot more funding. In addition to that, I mean, what are you advocating for? What's Secretary General Ban believe the planet needs right now?
As you said before, Secretary General Ban is co-chair of the Global Center of Adaptation. They have issued a set of recommendations that go to the core of the matter. And to illustrate that, let's imagine that we are all standing on the field of Sheila, a farmer in South Sudan. The land is dry and arid. There is no crops that she could harvest last year, not this year, because the drought has destroyed it all. She's worried about many things: how to feed her kids, how to diversify her crops, how can she irrigate with the little water that she has, the fields that she still owns, hopefully. She's really threatened. Her livelihood, like 300 million other smallholder farmers, is threatened. In other cases, it might be a flood and not the drought, but it is similar considerations that these people have. They do need access to technology that provides them information on the soil quality and on the weather conditions. They do need access to finance, to investment into, be it crops or be it microcredits for insurances that are at least buffering the worst of the brunt. So indeed, the GCA recommendation go to the core of exactly Sheila's and 300 million smallholder farmers' plight, and hence need to be followed. To invest into rural adaptation and basically into development of agriculture that is climate resistant and climate smart is not anymore just an option. It is an obligation. It is an imperative.
So on the subject of concrete steps countries can take, Aksel, earlier this year, your Prime Minister, along with the President of Ghana, issued an Arctic declaration on climate and food. What is at the heart of this call to action, and what is your message to everyone watching today's event?
Thank you. Yes, you are right. And the Arctic call to action urges countries, organizations, as well as individuals to step up efforts on SDG 2, the global goal to end hunger. And the call is also pointing forward to the UN Secretary General's coming summit on food systems 2021 as a pivotal moment for action. And from Norway's side, we will be strongly engaged in the preparation for the summit. And, it's not enough with a summit and a high-level political declaration. We need an action agenda. We need action on the ground with a strong foundation in the global goals. So we look forward to engage in to achieve a solution-oriented summit next year. And we also looking forward to support IFAD in their run-up to their replenishment. Thank you.
Thanks, Aksel. Sabrina, I want to finish by coming back to you. You're our IFAD Goodwill ambassador, and before COVID hit, you and I were in Sierra Leone, a country that has battled its own health crises with Ebola, and where farmers are already being impacted by climate change. You know, there we met many women, we heard their stories. Can you just tell us a little bit about what this actually means and what countries need to hear, what world leaders need to hear right now?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Mick. What an extremely eye-opening trip that was. I know probably for both of us, and frankly, really powerful. But I was grateful to have the chance to meet with rural farming communities in Sierra Leone last year. I learned so much on that trip, but I think what struck me the most, and what many people don't realize, is that during the Ebola crisis, more people actually died from the economic fallout and food insecurity that was caused by the disease and the disease itself. And at that same time, on top of that, many of Sierra Leone's crops and farmers were heavily impacted by climate change. Thankfully, we saw during Ebola, similar to what we're going to see now in COVID, that agriculture children to school. I mean, I met the most incredible and resilient community of farmers, including a woman named Aisatu, who's not too different from Monika's Sheila. And she received training in producing rice with climate resilient seeds so she could send her children to school. I mean, you know, I'm thankful that Simona, who works with IFAD, sent a picture of her the other day, and they're still okay and they're doing all right. Her face is the face of resilience. That's what resilience looks like to me. Someone who's already vulnerable, but has the training and support that they need to weather any storm. And it really is the smartest and most vital investment that our leaders can make right now. It needs to happen before the situation gets even more dire. And that is why I'm calling on all leaders and all countries to show their leadership and really step up and double their support to agriculture and IFAD this upcoming replenishment. You know, this is going to provide real hope and real change for millions of people living on the edge. I'm thankful to see Norway stepping up, and I look forward to other countries following suit. I hope that they do. But I just want to thank the Bloomberg and Global Citizen again for having me on this amazing platform, and what a brilliant conversation we've had.
Well, thanks, Sabrina, and thanks, everyone. On that note, you've all sent a powerful message today about why we should care about farmers, the solutions we already have, and the need for greater investment in rural areas, agriculture, so we can create a sustainable and resilient food system, key to both addressing climate change and poverty. This is no longer optional. Thanks, everyone, for joining today.